Next on KQED Newsroom, the mayors of San Francisco, Oakland, and San Jose.
Watch what I do and make sure you hold me accountable.
We've got to preserve what makes Oakland, Oakland.
Tech leaders don't want to get involved in funding whatever it is government does.
Their plans to take on the region's toughest problems. Good evening and welcome to a special edition of KQED Newsroom. I'm Thuy Vu.
And I'm Scott Shafer. Tonight we have a rare opportunity. We're going to talk with the mayors of the Bay Area's 3 largest cities about the region's most pressing issues. Joining us are Sam Liccardo, the newly elected mayor of San Jose, Libby Schaaf, the new mayor of Oakland, and San Francisco's Mayor Ed Lee, who's completing his first term and is running for re-election in November. Thank you all very much for being here. We're making a little history here, having you all here together.
This is the first time all 3 of you are in on the same show, on the same program. Mayor Lee, let's begin with you. Let's get right into it. The median home price in San Francisco is now $1 million. $1 million. Rents are at an all-time high. What do you say to people who say they can no longer afford to live in the city?
Well, we definitely have these challenges when these boom times have happened, and what we didn't do for many years, and I know the 2 other mayors here will comment on what they're doing as well. We didn't build enough housing in the past, and so the pressure is on the current stock. I've got a goal to build 30,000 units of new housing, rehab them, make sure and guarantee with our local government's participation that 33% will be affordable to low-income and medium-income families.
So that's 30,000 homes by 2020.
By 2020.
And that's a goal, right?
It's a goal.
It's a goal.
Is it realistic, though? Because from what I've read, you would have to finish 5,000 homes every year for the next 6 years to make that happen.
Last year, we did 4,000, and that was just the start of the effort. Once we have both the teams of developers and the city government working hand in hand with our decision makers, I know and I'm very confident. In fact, we've already figured out 15 to 20,000 of it already, and it really is a matter of getting the permits out, getting the land under control. The secret is land costs and how to control that.
Last year, Mayor, you gave an interview with Time magazine, and you said, and I'm quoting here, "I don't think we paid any attention to the middle class. I think everybody assumed the middle class was moving out." Why did you make that assumption?
You know, I think it's a fact. I think that when I've worked for the city of San Francisco for 23 years before I became mayor, and I looked at all the policies when I became mayor and said, what have we really haven't done? And everybody's saying, I think the fact is, our middle class is moving out. They weren't believing in the schools, the neighborhoods weren't strong enough for them on children's programs, and the affordability issue. So I've had to put together a very strong affordability agenda. The comment that I made was really to get ready to have a middle-class agenda for the city.
But how will you help people now? Because a lot of the housing you're talking about, and we know that in this city it takes 4 to 6 years to accomplish this, to get the homes built. How will you help people now, though, who are feeling priced out?
Well, first of all, it's not just housing is a major part, but you also have to give people other reasons to be here, to pause and say, hey, there's other things that we want to have here. Good schools, minimum wage that they can really use and help. A good transportation system, and a safe city.
Mayor Schaaf, a lot of the folks that are getting priced out of San Francisco are coming your way. They're coming to the East Bay.
They are.
And you know, for many years, Oakland felt like it was kind of missing out on the boom. Now it's all around you. People are moving in. Is it too much of a good thing? I mean, do you feel like somehow now your rents and prices are going up?
We are cautiously watching what is going on with housing prices, and we're trying to learn some cautionary tales, with all due respect, from San Francisco. But I'm really proud that we have been preparing for this moment. Our city has been doing these area-specific plans, and it's where you really engage in meaningful dialogue with the existing community about where do we want to see growth and where do we want to see preservation, where do we want to see changes in use. And so we have completed 5 area-specific plans, which just lays out a roadmap for where we want dense housing, and we clear the way for the zoning, and we pay for the environmental clearance. And that's how we can actually build housing quickly.
When I talked to you right after the election, you said, we're not going to make the mistakes San Francisco made. What did you mean by that?
You know, I love talking about the idea that Oakland can grow without selling its soul. that we have a secret sauce in Oakland. It's our diversity, our artists, our gritty industrial flavor, even our birthplace for social movements, and that we've got to preserve what makes Oakland Oakland. But I believe that we have laid the groundwork for inviting new people in because we've got space. We only have half the population of San Francisco, but 20% more land mass, which also means we've got all those roads and sewer pipes to maintain as well.
And a much smaller budget.
And a much smaller budget. You have an $8 million budget?
Billion.
Billion? I have a $1 billion budget.
Well, there's a lot of pressure on politicians to say we're gonna preserve the middle class. We're gonna fix homelessness. We're gonna solve homelessness. I mean, the city council passed recently a goal of ending homelessness by 2020. Is that really even possible? Really,
Well,
honestly.
We know one thing is we won't make any progress unless we set a clear strategic goal and start to marshal the forces and all the stakeholders together.
But are you
to
saying
reach
that
it.
30 years into homelessness, there's been no goal?
Well, I don't think at least in Santa Clara County, we've been very well aligned. We've got a lot of folks who are trying to solve different pieces of this problem. And really only after the last couple of years where we formed a nonprofit collaborative, Destination Home, that will really ensure that the city and the county and all the nonprofit stakeholders will be swimming in their lanes, working together, not tripping over each other to get grant funds and so forth, and really focusing on a housing first approach. We've started to get some traction. We identified the 1,000 people who are most chronically homeless, who have the greatest needs, and we've housed 840 of them in 2 years. Now, obviously, we've got a lot of work to do. We've got another at least 5,000 or 6,000 in San Jose alone. But the point is, by identifying those folks who are most vulnerable, they're also costing us the most in public resources, we can then save the dollars we need to serve more people.
But you recently broke up the encampment, the Jungle, one of the largest homeless encampments in the entire country. What I'm hearing now, because I grew up in San Jose, and what I'm hearing from people now is that there are simply smaller encampments that have spread out elsewhere. So instead of being in one contained area, you have a larger problem now in various parts of the city. What are you doing about that? And have you learned any lessons from San Francisco, perhaps? San Francisco has been dealing with homelessness, huge issue, for years, and the numbers haven't declined by that much.
I'll share something that we've tried that we have found really successful that we're experimenting with. A lot of these homeless shelters have very strict rules and regulations, and so a lot of the homeless population doesn't want to live in them. So we've been working with having a much more like a home environment, and it's actually turning out really well. We're seeing incredible outcomes as far as moving people into permanent, stable housing just by kind of lifting the really punitive nature of a lot of the public shelters.
Yeah, and
But
I
it's
think
also
as we
incredibly-
think about that encampment, for example, what didn't often make the news of the 300 people who were living there, we got 160 people housed out of that encampment, and in fact got vouchers in the hands of another 50 people. Those multiple encampments throughout the city existed well before the Story Road encampment was broken up. This is a very serious challenge that every major city in the country is grappling with. What I'm focused on is how we can rapidly expand the number of units that are available for those who have vouchers who simply can't find a place to be. We're focusing, for example, on rehabilitating old motels where we now have a lot of prostitution and crime. How can we lease up and buy up these motels and use them for affordable
Merely,
housing?
San Francisco has spent many millions, hundreds of millions of dollars every year on homelessness, and yet just drive around this neighborhood, you see people living under freeway overpasses. We've gotten, I know, thousands of people off the streets and into housing, and yet the numbers don't change. I mean, do you ever feel like, people are taking advantage of the city's generosity?
We're a popular city, and a lot of people are going to come here. They're going to
But
try to
those
do
are tourists that you want to
successful.
come.
No, there's a lot of people that come here looking for jobs, and they fall into hard times. Whether it's the rent that they can't afford or the job that they lost, and they're trying to get reskilled for the new job. These stories come very, very much directly to me, because I want to ask, why are there? I ask the same questions our critics are asking. Why is it that it looks not as different? And the data tells us for the last 10 years, we have put 11,000 people back into homes. SROs, as Sam has talked about, new housing, rehab housing. But I think the success really has to do with certain segments that we're making some headway in. For example, our veterans. We are one project away from completely ending chronic homelessness for our veterans. And we're celebrating that. We had the homeless count just a few nights ago, and it was very clear to us that we made some great progress.
But of course,
we're going to
those
be
are
able to
mostly
do that.
Vietnam vets, right? You got a whole other generation
Sure.
of vets coming online.
And no one's disputing that's a great milestone to meet. The reality is that the numbers are still above 6,000. They've been above 6,000 year after year after year. The city spends $500,000 a day on homeless services. Realistically, do you think that this is something that's solvable for the city? It's so intractable.
Yes, well, there's a lot. It's challenging for sure, but you still have to realize, and I know the other mayors will confirm this, we're literally still coming out of the greatest recession this country has ever faced. And when that recession hit us, literally no less than 5 years ago, thousands of people lost their jobs, and they are without homes, and we're going to try to help them. Now, we also have mental health issues, we have drug abuse issues, we have rehabilitation standards that we still have to get to, and all the other entities that depend on federal funding and national funding and state funding, they've suffered as well. So we're trying to harness what we can as a city to really reinvigorate all those agencies, but it's going to take some years. And so when we do have the ability to celebrate veterans, we're going to take that and model that. And then we have a navigation center that we've just announced where people have felt they didn't want to go in these shelters. There were too many rules. We have a navigation center that's going to take care of a lot of things and then put them into long-term housing. And that's what we're doing.
San Francisco and Oakland can be doing everything right about homelessness. It is still going to be a very serious challenge for cities. We are not only facing the emergence from the worst recession 3/4 of a century, we're dealing with a state that has taken away the largest source of affordable housing funding for cities in the state. That is tax increment financing through the redevelopment agencies. San Jose at one time built more affordable housing than any other city in the state with the redevelopment agency. We don't have that tool. And so I suspect we'll all be advocating in Sacramento very soon.
Making us creative. I mean, we're looking at other things. We're raising our minimum wages so that our residents can earn a decent living. Yeah. We are looking at preserving the affordable housing stock that we already have in our cities. We're recognizing that there isn't enough time to build new affordable housing and that we've got to build housing at all income levels.
And we're building a coalition beginning with us three very strongly to meet the challenge in Sacramento. Because we are going to demand, and I think we got the cities from Southern California all the way to Northern California join us, that we've got to have financial mechanisms that work to replace the ones
when
that
are you going to have this meeting?
It needs to be ongoing, and we have a great speaker in the Assembly, Toni Atkins, who really has championed this as her cause, and she's got the big city mayors behind her.
Okay, so that process has started. Let's shift gears, because I want to make sure we talk about something else that's also on people's minds, and that's policing. Mayor Schaaf, you met with U.S. Attorney General Eric Holder yesterday about building trust with communities. Yes. Afterwards, you said that your city needs to do more to build that, to mend that trust gap. How do you plan to do that?
Well, I just want to say, though, I'm very proud of what my city has already done, and yet we need to do more. And we can do that by utilizing the camera, for example, not just body cameras on police officers, not just that officers wear them, but we use that footage as a training tool to help really uncover unconscious bias.
Do you want to see more African American officers on the force? And how will you go about hiring more? Because your city is now facing a $30 million budget shortfall.
It is, and that is going to be a big challenge, but I believe that the way to get out of that is to permanently grow our tax base, and we will not do that without investing in public safety. The exciting thing is, as we have kind of retooled our police department and really embraced community policing, we've changed the way that we're doing recruitment, we've changed the way that we're doing training. And you see that the new police academies that are graduating in Oakland, they look like Oakland. They speak different languages, and we're also focusing on more homegrown officers that have come up in Oakland that know the community.
I think Mayor Schaaf is very good. Well, I was going to say the same thing.
See, well, she's really
great minds think alike. Is that what we can attribute this to?
Yeah, and I think I'm guessing we agree on this. You know, community policing is really an essential tool here. It's fundamentally a lack of relationship between the beat cop and the individual who's being served on the street that creates the conflict. And where you can develop relationships, where you can develop a familiarity and have the officers more deeply engaged in those neighborhoods they serve.
Let me ask a different police question. You've been dealing your city with police pensions.
Yes.
It's been very contentious. And all of you, though, have issues around pensions for public employees, police and others. They attempted to deal with it in San Jose. there was a lot of repercussions. You folks haven't maybe dealt with it as head on. What have you learned, and what would you advise them based on what San Jose has gone through?
Well, buckle your seatbelt. We have been through a really contentious period, and certainly I was a strong advocate for pension reform. Certainly took plenty of lumps for that. As a lifelong Democrat, I understand there's a consequence. At the same time, while we have really been able to finally stabilize our budget picture, we saved $50 million in the last 2 years. There's a significant fallout with our workforce. We're having a hard time retaining officers. We're having a very hard time attracting officers. And I think we all recognize we need to get back to the negotiating table. And we need to talk about how we can find a kinder, gentler pension reform.
When will you be going back to the negotiation table? Are there plans for that?
Yes, I'm hoping tomorrow. I mean, we've put in front of our police union a target for savings, and we are asking them to come to talk about everything from disability to pensions to see how we can broker a compromise here.
I also want to talk to you about tech, Mayor Lee, about San Francisco's relationship with the tech companies fueling the economy. That's all good. We're seeing an upsurge in jobs, but Airbnb, companies like that, Airbnb, for example, owes the city $25 million in back taxes. Why have you not been more aggressive in going after that and collecting that?
Well, first of all, I don't know if it's 25 million. That's what some speculators have. Yeah,
yes.
Our treasurer, tax collector, has a very strong policy of not discussing people's tax liability. And we know there is some taxes owed. I've taken a strong position, and so has the Board of Supervisors and everyone else I spoke to. Pay your taxes, whatever they owe, and get into a system where you don't owe it. Now, having said that, there's still delicate discussions going on about not changing neighborhood character going forward. They've agreed to pay all their taxes going forward. Well, and it's been a very popular system.
But three years ago, you mentioned the treasurer. You sent someone to the treasurer to urge him not to collect the back taxes. That was three and a half years ago. The money still has not been collected.
Well, I'm not so sure where you got that, Scott.
The chief technology officer of the city didn't go and.
No, I don't think that ever happened.
Have you publicly urged them to pay back taxes?
Oh yes, absolutely. I've made statement after statement. I've joined the Board of Supervisors to say, as a unified position, we think the back taxes should be paid, whatever is owed, but get them into the negotiated framework. The difference was whether or not, for the first time we wanted to regulate this industry, whether we would stop the actual regulation in order to have the back taxes. That's a little different right there.
Mayor, some of your biggest campaign donors are powerful players in the tech sector. And some residents in the city are questioning whether they can trust you to represent their interests. There are people who feel like, we just want decent schools and decent homes for our kids, and they are not confident that they can get that under your leadership. What do you say to them?
I would say, watch what I do and make sure you hold me accountable, because I've always been held accountable as a public official, and I quite frankly enjoy that challenge. You also have Mr. Mark Benioff donating $5 million to our middle grades in public schools without any strings or control, so that we can better the middle grades. This morning, we celebrated a $75 million donation from Mark Zuckerberg and Priscilla Chan to our general hospital.
Do you think tech companies can do more? And then I'd like to open this to all of you. Do you think tech companies have an obligation, now that they're going through pretty flush times, to do more to help the various issues you're facing in your cities?
I think you know what our answer is going to be to that. Absolutely.
Are you disappointed that they don't?
Absolutely, and I think that it's an educational opportunity to bring them along and to demonstrate to them how it enhances their bottom line and creates a better corporate brand for them. And the issue of diversity in tech, that is a huge one. I was just having an interesting conversation this morning with some tech representatives, and I was pretty disappointed at the response, because I think that the tech companies really need to respond to the disparities, how their workforces do not look like our cities.
Well, I think the good news is, I think a lot of folks in tech are getting it, and some folks in tech have gotten it for a long time. I mean, Santa Clara County and San Jose, led by the Silicon Valley Leadership Group, our tech companies formed the first housing trust in the country, which has been responsible for ensuring thousands of people get access to affordable housing, raising money directly through philanthropy, and also leveraging that. They are now about to embark on an effort on homelessness. I think tech is stepping up. We need to do more to encourage that and facilitate it. In some cases, get out of the way.
What more can you do? What more would you like to do?
I agree, and we have an opportunity to kind of give them a roadmap. I think that the intent is there.
But you know, if you look at a company like, say, Walmart, you know, they have been blacklisted from big cities like San Francisco and probably Oakland because they don't pay decent wages and benefits, and yet you've got a company like Uber, Lyft, they pay no benefits, they pay no health care to their employees. There's lawsuits over that right now. Why aren't those companies being really urged, or the companies that hire Google bus drivers, you know, to extend the same kinds of benefits to those folks?
Well, they are for sure being urged. We have an incredible array of technology leaders that have formed SF City through Ron Conway's leadership to really get them involved and learn along the way what it is to be a good corporate citizen. To match the history of San Francisco, I mean, you have the B of A owners, you have Wells Fargo, you have the Fisher family, Charles Schwab. They all have demonstrated how wonderful they could be to assist all kinds of things and needs they have, from arts, education, children, youth and family stuff. We're educating these new sudden overnight billionaire leaders. They're shocked about their wealth. Some of them don't even understand what that is and how they can demonstrate how to be a good citizen. It is, as Libby and Sam said, it's about an education process, and we're there to make sure that that's welcome and happening.
And I think also, you know, tech leaders don't want to get involved in funding whatever it is government does. That's not very interesting, and it's not their job. What they want to do is have an impact. They want to see if they can make a dent in the universe in some way, as Steve Jobs used to say. The idea is, if there's an innovative solution, I just spent an hour talking to a tech leader this morning who wants to have a big impact on homelessness, but he wants to do it with a very innovative approach to housing, where there's that hook. We can get them engaged. They want metrics, but they also want to do it differently. They don't want the same bureaucratic process.
They want outside the box thinking.
Yeah,
Exactly.
and that's fair. That's fair. I mean,
They want
government
that.
has been pretty slow moving in the past, and it needs to speed up. It needs to be as innovative as our business leaders are.
And what I've been told is they want outcomes. I mean, the outcomes.
Shouldn't cities want outcomes
Yeah,
too?
I'd say bring it on.
Absolutely. But, you know, I worked in the bureaucracy, and I know lethargism when I see it and feel it. And I have to move the entire agency. But once we do, and we get a little help from tech, you can see the wonders happening.
Well, something that you folks haven't been too lethargic on, well, except for maybe in the case of San Francisco, some would argue that, Mayor Lee, you didn't put up much of a fight to keep the 49ers when they wanted to move. But I wanted to ask you.
In fairness, that was his predecessor, right?
Ed would have kept them, I know.
He just got you off the hook.
That's true.
Score one for Scott.
Thank you, Scott.
I'll redeem myself later. But Libby, what advice do you have for Mayor Schaaf as Oakland tries to keep the A's and the Raiders?
From this guy over here.
Wait, I mean, he's stealing my basketball team. He's trying to steal my baseball team.
Now you got the topic of sports. I warned you.
I know. I thought you were going to stay
How
on
do you
that.
feel about that? Do you feel like they're trying to?
This isn't about the
I want to
cities.
hear from the two of you. I mean, what you're trying to get the A's. Libby, how do you feel about that?
This really isn't about Oakland versus San Jose. And, you know, the A's
Is it?
decision.
Some would
no, it
argue.
really isn't. I mean, this is about a bunch of billionaires in Major League Baseball decide where they want to put their teams. And in San Jose's
And you're saying
case,
pick us.
No, we're saying we want a fair chance to compete. We're saying we shouldn't be in the shadow of any other city, legally barred from being able to be the home for a major league team. Whether Oakland keeps a team or not is frankly a lot less relevant to the question. We just want a shot, as any major league city, any major city should. We're the 10th largest city in the country, and in fact, the largest city in the country without a team. It seems to me that we ought to at least have a shot.
Mayor Schaaf, are they picking on Oakland?
In fairness, the owner of the A's does not support this lawsuit, so it doesn't threaten me at all.
Yeah.
But I think the one thing that we do need to learn from each other is that the days of government subsidizing sports teams is over, and that we cannot afford to have a race to the bottom in these kind of ill-conceived stadium deals. And maybe Oakland has learned its lessons from the past.
You did work together on the Olympics. Will you
Exactly.
work together to try to get the Olympics again?
Oh yeah. I mean, as brief of the ability we had to start talking about it when the decision was made, I think we got a sense from each other that when it comes to such a important international event like the Olympics, it's something that brings all of our cities together, because ultimately, I think us mayors realize not just sports, but academically,
Transportation.
transportation,
Let's talk about that.
economically.
Yeah.
Our Bay Area is now having to compete with the likes of London, Paris, Shanghai, other places, where if we don't work together, then we all lose. And I think this is where what unites this is good transportation, housing, whether it's in any of our cities that's affordable, but good paying jobs, and a very open attitude about accepting diversity. I think when we do all of this together, we raise the entire Bay Area to compete on a worldwide level, because every company that is now established in any of our cities, they think globally. They no longer think just locally.
So you'll put in another bid. Just real quickly, as we wrap this up, what's a top region-wide problem that you think you can solve by working together, Olympics aside?
Transportation.
Transportation.
The Bay Area, you know, we're blessed with that big body of water in the middle, but it creates a lot of challenges. We, I think, are all urbanists. We're all regionalists, and I think we're all excited about having a much more strategic, intelligent plan around getting people around between our different cities.
All right.
Yeah, I want that BART station to be finished in San Jose. That's going to be helpful.
I
but
think he wants that too.
Right, and then we need a Transbay tube to help with the congestion.
Yeah,
Real quick, would you rather have that high-speed rail money spent on BART and some regional transportation? Real quick, yes or no?
You know, in a world of unlimited resources, we want it all. And I want my potholes filled too, you know?
That is such a political response. I have to say. Yes or no?
She got elected political office.
All right, well, listen, we are out of time. I want to thank all of you, Mayor Lee, Mayor Schaaf, Mayor Liccardo. Thank you so much for coming in.
Thanks
It's a
for
pleasure.
having
Thank you
us.
very much.
It was a really great conversation. Thank you. And for all of KQED's news coverage, please go to kqednews.org. Thanks so much for joining us. Have a good night.